Some people have extraordinary experiences in life. Some people go through life just mundanely, and I think it's very important that when you have an extraordinary experience in life, to be able to share that experience with other people so that other people can develop a perception around that experience that somebody else had and use that for their own gain, benefit, enthusiasm, whatever that might be. This is Eamon. Eamon is my dad, and Eamon and I had a very, very profound, unusual experience back in the 80s, in the late 80s. And we wanted to share that experience with as many people as possible so that that experience never got forgotten. And in the story that we'll share, it's up to the viewer, the watcher, to determine yourself what it is that you want to derive out of that experience. And you can make whatever assumption that you want, whatever perception that you want. The experience for me started when I was hanging with two groups of people back in Dublin City. And one group of people were a group of dark people, the dark world people. And another group of people were the light people, light workers. And I had to make a choice. Which way do I go? And life can be very conflicting. You don't know which way to go. Dark can be a very attractive place to go. Light can be a less attractive place to go, but it's definitely the place that we all should go and want to go. So we'll just share that experience out with you. There was a neighbor of my aunt who developed an inoperable brain tumor. And everybody in the area was aware that the neighbor was dying from this brain tumor. The ill neighbor had informed my aunt that something very strange happened in her home and invited my aunt to come and visit her home. My aunt then relayed the message to my dad and relayed the offer to my dad, an offer to visit this woman's home who had the inoperable brain tumor to experience something strange that was happening for her. In doing that then, my dad invited me to this opportunity to visit this woman's home to experience something very strange that was happening for her. And he'll tell you the rest of the story himself. So Eamon, what happened? What took place?
So myself and Ray were invited to the house. We went around to the house, invited up the stairs and into this bedroom, which we went to. When we got to the top of the stairs, there was a guy there guiding everybody into the room. We stopped, he put his hand on our head and he turned my head around and he said, "Do you see the image on the door?" I said, "Yes, I do." And the image was a fetus. And in the bottom of it was definitely a shape of a baby, 100%. But I said to him at the time, it was supposed to be the face of Christ. I said to him at the time, I have seen this image before, because when I was a kid, at choir boy in Western Road Church in Dublin, and in one of the photographs there that's around the church, is still there at the moment, I saw it last year, is this image of the face that I saw on that door with the fetus in the bottom of the face, in the beard of the face. Then we went into the room, and when we went into the room, Ray walked in front of me. When we walked in, to my left, there was a robe. On the door of the robe, I saw the image of the Blessed Virgin. In the middle of the room, I saw the image of the Virgin that Ray was dumbfounded looking at. We said nothing to each other. We just looked at these images in amazement, stood there for a few minutes, and then we left. When we left, we went outside, went down the stairs, went out onto the footpath, out the front door, onto the footpath, turned around to each other and said, "Oh my God, what have we just seen?"
And as we walked into the room, the two people standing in the room, if I was to be asked to describe what I saw when I walked in there, how would I define those two people? The only way that I can define them in the most literal way that I possibly can is to define them as two people that we would perceive as Jesus and Mary standing in a bedroom. And to put context around that, these particular people and this experience happened when there was no internet. There was no mobile telephones. These were poor people. They didn't have a lot of money. So in other words, there was no technology to create this appearance. This was two people standing in a room who stayed in that room for 6 weeks. Over time, there was about 500 to 600 people who were invited into the home to see these people standing in this room. And from my side of things, it left me with no other conclusion that there is something mysterious outside of us that lives and exists outside of us. Because we walked into that room and we saw that. As my dad and I walked into the house with other neighbors as well, we were able to just see into the right-hand room through a little glass door before we went up the stairs. And in the room was what's called a novena. And a novena is whereby local people from your church will come in and pray for your recovery. So this woman had an inoperable brain tumor. She's going to die from the brain tumor. She has very young children. And I remember distinctly, before we walked up the stairs, looking in and seeing the children doing their homework. So they were sitting there completing their homework. And there was a little group of people who were praying. So this woman had a novena in her home, where for 24 hours a day, local people from the church will come in and pray. So they'll pray in groups. They'll pray for 6-7 hours. A group will leave, another group come in, and it happens all day long, 24 hours a day, for her miraculous recovery. Well, she had her miraculous recovery, and the brain tumor disappeared, and that woman is still alive today. And that's many, many, many years ago. Funnily, I was at the Vatican about 25 years later, and I was sitting in a cafe, and I met a priest in the cafe. And this priest and I struck up a conversation, and I was sitting with my partner, Antonella. And the priest was telling us that he runs pilgrimages around the world. Pilgrimages to find God, to find Jesus, to find your soul, to find your purpose, to find your eternal gateway to eternity, to heaven. And I made a decision to tell this priest the story. And Antonella was able to pick up on my vibration because she just knew what I was about to do. And I looked at Antonella and said, I think I'll tell the story. And she knew exactly what the story was. But in her very discreet way, she gave me a negative nod, as in, I don't think you should, Ray. But I decided to. And this man has spent his entire life searching for the truth. Jesus, God, whatever. And I told him the story. And I was really stunned with his response. And his response to me was this verified? And right then I knew Antonella was right. I should never have told this man this story. Because rather than participate in the conversation with me and get involved in the conversation with me and ask me about what was happening in my life, in my world, what profound effects did this have, instead of that, he decided to consciously, inadvertently try to discount the story rather than explore the story. So from that perspective, we find it greatly difficult in sharing that story. But here we are sharing that story. For me then, the choice afterwards was, which group of people do I hang with? The group of dark people that I was very involved with at the time, or the opportunity that I had to work with and focus on and build a relationship with a group of very enlightened people, light workers. And I went down the light worker road. So for me today, and me and my dad and other people that experienced that, you cannot erase that memory and that experience from us. And we still talk about it today. And because we can't discount it, it is almost embedded in our genetics that something greater exists. And after I finish with my dad here today, and I head off tonight, in fact, to fly to Dublin. And I'll do what I always do when I get to Dublin. I go and I knock on this woman's door, who's obviously a much older woman now, who survived. So myself and my dad wanted to share that story so that people can make their own conclusions. And I hope that you take something from this. And in the world that we live in today, we live in a very logical thinking, commercial world of reality. But just because everything that you see in your reality is all that you think that's in your reality, it does not mean there's not another reality out there. Maybe you just haven't experienced that other reality. I remember Eamon, when I was very young as a kid, being extremely sick. He was so sick with liver disease that he was actually yellow, and he was on medication. I remember the story. I remember the trauma of living with that trauma, with my mum being traumatized, with my dad being so young and being so sick and so ill. My mum was worried about my dad dying. And my dad was treated in the hospital for this very serious, life-threatening liver disease. And I do remember my dad being medicated. I remember the story that my dad was going to be medicated for life. And this is his story, his experience.
And this experience occurred actually nearly 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, I got very, very ill. And I was so ill that I was getting blood tests every 3 months. I was attending the doctors, specialist in Jervis Street Hospital in Dublin for 2 years. Every 6 months I had a liver biopsy to see how my liver was. This was a problem. I had a problem with my liver. and it never got better. So my family, at the time, got together because we weren't that rich, we were just ordinary working people, got together and got myself and my wife Ursula a ticket to Lourdes. And Lourdes is a place in France where apparitions happened 150 years ago. And millions of people go there every year looking for something. Anybody that goes there is definitely looking for something. We left on a Saturday morning, I will never forget it. And we got to Lourdes the same day, because it's only a 3-hour trip. We got to Lourdes the same day. And when we did, we went with a group, a pilgrimage group. That's a group of people that have gone there specifically for something, they're looking for something. So went into the hotel and we made friends very, very quickly. So some of the people, we had a priest among us. So we kept saying, okay guys, anyone wants confession, come down here. And my answer all the time was, oh no, Father, I'm sorry, I'm not going to have confession. I need a deaf priest and you're not the man I want. And this went on for 4 days. On the 4th day, which was a Wednesday, there was a major pilgrimage in Lourdes itself. Lourdes is a big place. It's well worth having a look at this on the internet. Have a look at Lourdes. And we all went down to see this procession of the sick, they call it. So all the sick come out of the hospital that's there and they're pushed around the grotto where the Virgin Mary appeared and all of those type of things. And we're all standing there and it's a very, very hot day. And all the people around were saying, come on, Eamon, we get confession. There's the confessional there. And right to my left, I'll never forget this, right to my left is this building called the Chapel of Confessions. So I said, oh, I need a deaf priest. All this carry-on was going on. Everyone was getting a laugh out of me looking for a deaf priest. So then it comes along and it says, okay, fine. I'm going to go into the Chapel of Confessions and have a look around. And when I went in, I had to actually push my way into it. There was hundreds of people inside. And it was shaped in a T. The door was at the bottom, and the T at the top, and each area was covered in confessionals. All different languages over the doors, different languages. And I looked around, and at that time, the sweat started pumping out of me. It was very warm, but the sweat started pumping out of me. So I looked around, and looking for an excuse, I couldn't find an English. So I turned around to walk out the door, and when I did, out of the corner of my eye, I caught this E on this door. And when I moved back, pushed my head back, I saw English. So I decided, right, I'm going to go up there. And I had to literally push my way up to the top where this was. And when I got up to where this confessional was, there was no seats. So I walked around the back and I knelt down on the floor, just outside the confessional. As soon as I knelt down on the floor, I lifted up my head to look around me, see what was going on around me. How long am I going to be here waiting on confessional? And across the wall, there was a door, and the door opened. And this very old monk came out on a walking stick. And I'm looking at this monk, and he walked past everybody, walked around behind me, which I didn't see, put his hand on my shoulder and said to me, would you like confession, son? And I said, yes, I would like confession. So he said, come with me, and he brought me into this confessional. And when we went into the confessional, the sweat is absolutely, literally coming down on my eyes, getting in my eye. I'm trying to brush it away. And I'm sitting down and I'm brushing this away. And I start talking. He says, what's your confession, son? And I start talking. And he said, stop for a minute, son. You'll have to move closer because I'm deaf. And I thought, oh my God. So I told this priest my confession. Got up, he gave me a penance, which you do when you get a confession. You say some prayers, and afterwards I went outside and knelt down to say the prayers. When I did, he came out of the confessional and walked straight across and back in that door and didn't hear another confession. So I comes along and I comes outside with everybody. I thought outside I'd never get to tell them the story what's happened in the confessional. So when I went outside, I said, oh, you'll never believe what's happening to me here. My God, this priest came along. I couldn't see. The sweat was pumping out of me, all of these type of things. When we went back to Dublin the following Friday, I think it was, I had an appointment a week later in the hospital. So I goes into the hospital as usual and have my blood test. When I had my blood test, I come back the next day to see the results of it. I went into the specialist, he's sitting there, and he knew me by name personally now because I've been attending him so many times. And he looked up my blood results and he said to the doctor that was standing beside him, there's something wrong with these. Take Eamon outside and get him tested again. Eamon, he says, you're going to have to wait around for another hour or two till we get the test of this. There's something wrong here. So the guy goes outside, came back 2 hours later, went in, the results were in, he looked at the results, he said, I can't believe this. He said, your blood is perfect. That was the first time in 6 years my blood was perfect. He says, cancel your tablets, you don't need to be on them anymore. And he says, come for a blood test in 6 months' time. And I left, and here I am today. So anyway, that's a story that I had to share. I've shared that with quite a lot of people. So that it definitely tells you that there's something going on there.